Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Grand Rounds. I have the pleasure today of introducing Dr. Susan Johnson. Dr. Johnson is an obstetrician and gynecologist from the University of Iowa, where she also earned her medical degree and a master's degree in preventive medicine and environmental health from the Iowa College of Medicine. Dr. Johnson has a very extensive curriculum vitae, and included within that, she sits on the Board of Examiners for the American Board of Obstetrics and Gynecology, as well as for the Iowa Medical Examiners Board. She's on the editorial board or serves as a reviewer and editor for 8 scientific and clinical journals, and she has to her credit over 119 peer-reviewed manuscripts that she has authored. Not only will you be impressed today by her academic and intellectual prowess, but I think you'll also be very entertained and enlightened in the discussion today. Dr. Johnson?
Thanks, Joel. It's really a pleasure to be here in La Jolla today. I actually have been here before, but not to the Scripps, and so it was fun to walk around this morning and look at your buildings and get a sense for the environment in which you all work. Whenever I travel out and about, I like to orient people to the location of Iowa, since not everyone's too clear on that. So here we have Iowa, here, and the 2 places we are not, Idaho and Ohio. So in case you were ever confused, this is your opportunity to learn about that. Here I am standing in front of a large corn cob, one of the major agricultural exports of the state of Iowa. A prize to anyone who knows what the corn cob is made out of. Any guesses? No prize, really, but. Still cheese. No, that's Wisconsin. That's Wisconsin. People never used to get it, and more recently it's milk jugs, spray-painted milk jugs. So you see turned upside down with the little indentations. Isn't that cool? So I just wanted to say a little bit about myself. So my academic credentials really have absolutely nothing to do with why I'm here today, of course. I'm a self-trained, almost expert in the area of personal productivity, time management, and organization. My goal in doing this work is to bring what I think are the best ideas out of that sort of literature, such as it is, to people like yourself who don't have time to go out and read the 4,000 books that are out there on this topic. I got interested because of my own problems in this area, and I will say that I'm constantly working on my own system and my own habits, and have been doing it pretty actively for the past, I think now, 12 or 13 years. So I think I have a pretty good idea of some of the struggles that you go through because I go through them myself. I want to refer you to, at the end of the handout, a set of references. We can't cover really all but much, but just some selected ideas this afternoon. And what I've done for you is select the books that I like the best, that I think you would be able to go to and be satisfied that you're getting good advice. And then at the top, I put a website which contains a set of essays that I've written for academic physicians and scientists, which some of you may sound familiar to you. And they cover individual topics, and there'll be a nice reference for the talk today in a kind of a very focused way that you can get some other ideas without having to actually go out and buy a book. I'm also happy, really, to have any of you email me. I'm going to have you use my Gmail account because I'm trying to learn how to incorporate that into my life. And I will respond to you, so if you have questions or comments, please do get in touch with me. Now, I like to start presentations to academic audiences with this quote from Pierre Bourdieu, who I'm told was a famous sociologist from the middle part of the last century. And among the things that he wrote about was time. And he said, it's mainly through the control of time that academic power is exercised. Now, of course, he didn't get that quite right because none of us can really control time. We all have the same amount of time. It just goes on. What we really can control is our activities in the context of time. And it's that we all need to work on. But the point that how you spend your time will determine how successful you are in accomplishing your goals in your career and in your personal life is absolutely true. And I think at some level, we all know that. Now, I want to begin with just some general comments. I think it's safe to say that if you were to go around this hospital and just speak with anybody that you ran into, whether it's staff, faculty, physicians, I'm told the residents are all over here, so house staff, nursing staff, patients who come from all sorts of backgrounds. Most people would tell you that they feel kind of overwhelmed in their life. This seems to be a feature of the way we currently live in the 21st century. We feel overwhelmed by all that we have to do. There are kind of two places that stuff comes from. One is Julia Morgenstern, who's one of the authors I referenced, talks about when you have a problem, trying to figure out whether it's them or it's me. And there's a lot of it's them out there these days. I was talking with one of our participants this morning about the electronic medical record, which I don't know here apparently is not yet a required feature of your life. Is that the case? We just switched to compulsory universal electronic medical record about 5 months ago at Iowa, and I have to tell you, it's really hard to make that conversion. And nothing you can do about that. All of the new regulations and documentation requirements and all the things that you can think of if you're a practitioner of medicine that have happened to us happened in the last 10 years are outside of our control by and large. What we do need to do is, instead of spending our time worrying about things that we can't control, is we need to spend some time thinking about what we can control. And so I want to make 3 observations here. First, many of us try to do too much, things that we don't really have to do. Some of this is because you are all smart, curious people. And there are lots of things you're interested in. That's good. What's bad is when you take kind of the common cultural advice that you need to be perfect in a lot of different zones. You need to be a perfect parent, perfectly fit, a gourmet cook, make your own holiday wreaths and candle holders, as well as be a successful practitioner or scientist or whatever it is that you do in your career. And we take on more things than we really realistically can do. We all have that problem. Secondly, we don't always know what will help us. And I say that here because it's pretty common experience for me in talking to any kind of academic audience, whether they're English professors or physicians, to find that people haven't really spent much time delving into the so-called time management literature. They really haven't ever thought about it very much. Let me, quick question. How many people here have ever read a book that would fall into the time management literature? So see, I'm seeing only about 4 hands go up. It's pretty uncommon, and so it's not something that we learn in school, unless you go to school in Scotland, it turns out. Now I've learned that in Scotland they do incorporate this into their curriculum. Interesting thing, but not here. And then the final point is not about any of you. You understand. But you probably have run into this situation before where if you're a physician, you're talking with a patient and they have some sort of pretty straightforward condition, and there are 3 or 4 evidence-based, or maybe 2 or 3 evidence-based options for treatment, and you explain each one of them very carefully, and then they say, well, yes, but I don't want to do that, and yes, but I don't want to do that, and yes, but I can't do that, and then there you are. Does that ever happen to anybody here? The yes, but syndrome. It's that resistance to doing something that's outside your comfort zone or that you feel uncomfortable with. And I just want to observe here that sometimes when you're in the process of thinking about your work habits, which is really what we're talking about today, and thinking about making changes, you may observe in yourself a little resistance to trying an idea that either I have suggested or that you've read about. And we don't have enough time to talk about how you can fix that, but I want you just to be aware of that resistance and then say, well, maybe I could just try it for a few days and see what I think. Because of course it's true that if you're going to make a change, you have to make a change. So there you go. All right, I want to begin. You see how I have this really long introduction? And it's so that everybody can drift in before we get to the good stuff. So don't worry. I think I know what I'm doing here. I want to discuss what I think are 2 myths in this whole sort of area of productivity. The first one is this: neatness is a virtue. Now, to explore this topic a little bit further, we're going to do a test, sort of like what you do when you go to the ophthalmologist or the optometrist, where you're having your eyes refracted, and they put you up against that machine that kind of looks like binoculars, and then they cover over one eye, and then they flash 2 cards, A and B, and you have to say which one is clear so they can figure out what diopter. You know that one? Everybody's done that before. Okay, we're going to do that test now. Are you ready? A, B. A, B. We have to do it 3 times. A, B. Okay. Now, when I first started showing these slides maybe 5 years ago, I would say, which office would you prefer to go into in the morning? And then I thought everybody would shout out B and we would just move on. But that is not what people say. People have all kinds of negative reactions to this second slide. And so I'm curious to know if anybody here has the same reaction. Anybody have anything about this that they don't like or that makes them kind of nervous, or observations about the person that works here? Or just shout them out. Too neat. And you feel kind of uncomfortable, and it's uncomfortable, and a lot of work that would be required to maintain that. And how could you get anything done if you were always worried? Okay, good. Anything else? This person doesn't have enough work to do, or they're on vacation this week, or they just retired, or they're dead. Something happened. Okay? And this person, I always have, when I talk to a group of managers, before I even say anything, someone shouts out, I would give that person more work to do. There is this kind of feeling that unless your work is all out visible, you must not be doing anything. And then back to the comment you made, there are a lot of us who, if we put all of our work away in a file, we would forget about it. It's sort of out of sight, out of mind, and so this feels like it wouldn't be a very good place to actually get work done. Any other comments? Okay, I think you've captured the big picture concerns that people have. So as I've talked with groups about these two slides and this topic, I've come to believe a couple of things. One is that the purpose of making changes in your work habits is not about achieving neatness. For some of you, this will be a huge relief because you thought that's what you were going to have to do, and now I'm telling you don't. Isn't that great? What you do need to have is a level of organization of your current work, the stuff you're currently working on, that allows you to get to that work quickly and not spend a lot of time rummaging around. So there is a certain amount of organizational change that you may need to make, but it doesn't have to reach the level of being neat. The second observation is that I wish that we would all stop making judgments about other people based on their level of neatness. I think we all have an internal standard that we feel most comfortable with. For some people, it honestly is this. They're just fine. And if they went to this, they couldn't work. Most people, and vice versa, and some people are, most of us are just in the middle. We need a little bit of stuff out, but not that much. So they just suspend judgment about other people, figure out what your own level of need is, and then work toward achieving that. Now here I'm going to just show you some examples of colleagues of mine, just to illustrate this point. So this is the actual, it's taken with an old camera phone, so it's kind of grainy. But do you see that the man, my colleague is actually in the picture. You can kind of see his arm up there in the corner. He's smiling, by the way. He knew I was taking these pictures. So this is his desk. You cannot find his keyboard to his computer. It's complete. Outside of his office for several years, he had a chair that had 15 unopened Federal Express boxes. So this is a senior guy, international reputation, highly productive, serene. And he works in this environment and always has. Here's a colleague of mine who's a department chair at a different institution. And what she does is collect Navajo rugs. And then you see she just puts them over the clutter. So her whole office is lined by a ring of rugs. And she also does just fine, and this is more pleasant for her to look at. Now, the second myth I want to just say briefly something about is this idea that we should all be balanced in our activities. And maybe some of you have seen this wheel before, which is a great thing, by the way. This is a great tool where you sort of divide up your areas of focus in your life into these different areas that you can read here. And then you're supposed to kind of estimate where you are, and you're supposed to move sort of toward a situation where there'd be a circle, and so that I guess, balanced, the wheel would turn or something like that. And I think if you read sort of in the popular literature about this topic, people will talk about how you need to kind of do everything at an equal pace. And I just think that's probably not only not practical, but maybe not just wrong. That it's better to think of our life as a series of events. And a nice way to think about it that I just read about the other day is that your career or your personal life is like a book with a series of chapters. And in the chapter now, what you're doing is finishing your training program and keeping your personal life together and trying to develop some balance there. And then as you get onto, if you go into a faculty position, which I'm sure some of you are going to do, right? Are there some academic aspirations here in this group? I want you to think about that, okay? And the new chapter will be focused on getting your research career started. and getting your practice started. And then as you move into, you've been promoted now, and do you see how this, if you think about it in chapters, you can do kind of a serial focus and pull back in some areas and expand in others. And that's what most of you do anyway, and I think you should stop feeling guilty about it. I think that's the idea. All right, now we're going to go into the specific methods. Here's my goal. I want to describe each of these core ideas and a couple, and enough information so that you could walk out of the room and start implementing them right away if you wanted to. I don't expect anybody to go out and do all of these all at once. My hope is that everybody will get one idea that they can take away today, that they can try out. Secondly, none of these ideas are, as they say, rocket science. The intellectual ability required to understand all this stuff is pretty low. And remember, I'm a gynecologist, so this works out just perfectly for me. What is the trick is to understand kind of what the idea is and to figure out how you're going to tailor that method to your own situation. And that's where the idea is. So for some of you, you do all these things already, and I'm hoping I might give you some ideas about making it better. I'm imagining you will have heard it all. So the first idea that we're going to talk about is the idea of doing it now. Doing it now. Taking action. When we come upon something, instead of saying, oh, I don't have time to do this now, I'll do it later, we say, how could I do this now? Some people do that naturally. I bet you know people that's just their natural way of working. But for most of us, it isn't, and it requires effort to think about. So one way to implement this principle is to use what David Allen, where is Ojai relative to here? North? How far north? 3 hours? It must be near, I thought it was just like right around here. Anyway, we're within spitting distance of the Grail, the David Allen mothership. How many people have ever read his book, Getting Things Done, The Art of Stress-Free Productivity, or know about him? So anyway, okay, great. So this is the way Allen formulates it. It's called the 2-minute rule. Okay, I'm going to define the rule for you. This is the operational definition of the 2-minute rule. When you encounter a task that you estimate will take 2 minutes or less, you should do it right on the spot. When you encounter a task that you estimate will take 2 minutes or less, you should do it right on the spot. That's the 2-minute rule. Now, it's a pretty simple idea. It's a pretty simple idea. And I'll just tell you from having practiced this idea, even in the pre-Allen days from a different system, this is just a fabulous way to get more done, feel more energetic, not get behind, reduce clutter. It's really a great idea. But when people hear about this rule and think about it briefly, they generally come up with an unfavorable idea about how this would really work. It doesn't seem safe to them to use. So what I'd like to do is just spend really a couple minutes here, if you could kind of turn to the people around you and come up with what you think are the big problems that you can see with implementing this rule of when you encounter a task and you estimate it'll take 2 minutes or less, you should do it right on the spot. So I'm going to give you a short time here to go ahead and do that. I'm going to try to capture the ideas because this is so important. I want to make sure that we address your resistance directly in this session. So you're on. You may start. Okay, we've had a minute and a half. So first you can see that's a pretty long time, really. We didn't even make it to 2 minutes. But I see that you see me typing, so you've all stopped. So what I'd like to do is actually capture these ideas. We'll see if we can get most of them here. So if people could sort of shout out and not repeat things, if you could do that. So over here, any ideas here? Too many. Okay. Oh, easy to underestimate. I'm not a very good speller, so please don't hold me to that. Time required. Over here. Okay, get distracted from, I'm paraphrasing here, priorities. How's that? Does that capture it? Over here, anything? Yeah, so backlog of other tasks would grow. How's that? Does that do it? Over here in the younger crowd, anything? What's that? Oh, you think the 2-minute things are unpleasant? Or? Okay. Okay. So that's a very good point. Unpleasantness will. I'm not going to write that one down because that's sort of true of any task. But absolutely. Anything else? Any other ideas? Well, I think actually we've gotten kind of the big ones here. Actually, this is great. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to switch back. And I want to just make some comments, pre-prepared comments, anticipating what you would be saying during this little session here. So the first one is that people often make the mistake, understandable by the way, of assuming that if something is only going to take 2 minutes, it must not be important. And conversely, that anything that's important must take longer than 2 minutes. You have to stop thinking that way because it's not true. Some absolutely essential things that you need to do today will only take a couple minutes. And some things that will take a really long time are not very important at all. So reading the New York Times from 10 to 11 o'clock comes to mind as something that is utterly unimportant in the context of your day, but you might nonetheless choose to do that. So you have to just look at what the thing is and not the amount of time it's going to take in terms of its priority status for the day. I think that's a big breakthrough for people to get that's true. And this goes along with a second point, which is a piece of the definition that I conveniently left out is when you encounter a task that needs to be done by you and you estimate it'll take 2 minutes. So you don't do things simply because they're going to take 2 minutes. You have to make a decision about whether this is something that you need to do. And you could say that goes without saying, but I want to say it so you're clear with me about that. Now, here's the critical piece. The first part of this definition sounds a little odd, when you encounter a task. But this is the key to using this principle safely. Because what you have to do is put yourself in a situation to not encounter tasks when you're working on other things. So that means turn the phone off, close your door, turn off your email screen. Don't let yourself encounter tasks, potential 2-minute tasks. Shut them out. Work on the important stuff. Then spend some time encountering tasks, i.e. looking at email, going through paper mail, accepting phone calls, etc. Now, I understand perfectly that you cannot shut yourself out completely willy-nilly. You don't have total control over when you can do this, okay? But you have more control than you think. A lot of people in our culture think that they need to be available every minute of the day. The door always has to be open. They always have to be available on the phone. And it's just not true. Because if you look at how you spend your day, there's a lot of the day that you're not available to other people. So you have to just be prepared to take some of that I'm not available time for yourself. Or even if you are available to things like pages and phone calls, you need to not distract yourself by always having email up where you can see it. Just don't encounter it. Okay? You have to learn to put boundaries around that sort of stuff. There's another interesting way of twisting this from Kerry Gleason, what he calls doing it now later. This sounds like cheating to me. Don't you think that sounds like cheating? But here's what he means by that. This is something that all of you do probably already in certain parts of your life. And that's the idea that it's not very efficient it turns out to do one email at a time. Do an email, then go back to some other work, and then come back and do an email. It's more efficient if you do email in what are called batches, where you spend 20 minutes or an hour or even 10 minutes, and do as many as you can and then stop and go on. You probably do this with your bills at home. You probably say, oh, I'm going to pay all my bills on Friday afternoon or Saturday morning. And you kind of collect them during the week, and then you sit down and do bills. It's more efficient to do it that way. And so the idea here is that there will be certain kinds of activities, tasks, that are best done in batches. And your goal is to find a time, collect them all in a place where you can find them, and then when the time comes to do that batch, you do it, and you do them all. You don't further defer it. So do it now, later. And this addresses the biggest issue, really, I think, in the end that people have, and that is the problem of misjudging the amount of time it will take to do the task. People say, oh, I get started, and then I find myself it's really more complex, and then I'm caught up, and 3 hours later, I'm still working on this thing that wasn't on my schedule for the day. Or I start doing this, and then people respond back to me, and then I get caught up in the email conversation. Or I find out, I get caught off guard, and I get on the web, and then I start reading about other things that I'm interested in. So here, the discipline is to say, I'm going to try this, but if it's going to take longer, I'm going to stop. You can even say it out loud. Stop! Just like that. And then just stop. If you hadn't done it at all, you would have to, defer it to a later time. Here what you've done is you've done a little bit, and now you understand that task better. Does that make sense to you? That you thought it was going to take 2 minutes, but in the end, it's not. It's going to be either way more complicated or a little more complicated. So the next time you come back to that task, you will have a much better idea of what you need to do. So there's never, in my mind, with one exception, there's never a problem with starting something. Even writing a 500-page novel. There's no problem with starting it immediately and spending a few minutes, as long as you have the discipline to stop and go back to whatever you're free. Now, the one exception, you would all think of it if I gave you a minute, and that's when you're talking to people. I want everyone to promise me that they will not carry an egg timer around, and then when they're on the phone or speaking with someone, turn the egg timer over, and when the grains of sand come to the bottom, say, sorry, your 2 minutes is up. I'll be going about my... I heard that there was actually a professor, I can't remember, it might have been a California school, who actually does that. He has a 15-minute timer. And when graduate students come into the office, he turns it over, and that's how much time they have. They got to get out fast. So don't do that. I don't really care for that idea. Okay. Now, the second recommendation is that you keep track of all of your work in writing. I don't care if it's handwritten or typed. Doesn't matter to me. And to do that, there is a particular way of making lists that I think is effective here. Again, this particular method comes from the David Allen method. If you don't like this one, you can do something else. But the core underlying idea here is that you cannot make decisions about how you're going to allocate your time or how you're going to organize things if you don't know what it is that you need to do in the first place. You have to begin by thinking about what is the work that I'm trying to get done. And then most of you have way too much to keep it in your head. You just can't remember all that stuff. And so really the only thing that you can do is figure out a way to record it, and I'm going to tell you a method for doing that. For those of you who feel as if keeping it in your head is a good idea, I have a scientific explanation for here is how a gynecologist thinks the brain works. This is the method here. So we have a slice of the brain filled with memories, things you're trying to remember, and there's only this is so easy. There's only a tiny little room for thinking left at the base of the brain. So what more do you need? Well, here's an example of someone who functions the way I'm suggesting, Einstein. So Einstein apparently didn't try to remember anything. He didn't know his own phone number. He said, if I want to call myself, I'll look it up in the phone book. No problem. He had two guys that followed him around, probably graduate students, with legal pads, and when he thought of something, he would just say it, and then they would write it down for him. And he had everything captured. He said the brain is not for remembering. It's not a storage device. The purpose of the brain is for problem solving, creativity, thinking, and the more stuff you have packed into your head that you're trying to remember, the harder it will be to do those things. And so get it all out. Get it all out and onto a place where you trust it will stay. And that's often the problem people have with lists is they don't have a trusted list system. They write things down and then they lose the list, if that sounds familiar to some of you. So, okay, so here I'm going to suggest 3 lists. 1, everything that you're trying to get done. It's sort of intermediate level stuff. Like, here's an example of the kinds of things that I want on this list. These are things that you're trying to get done, accomplish over the next few days, weeks, or months. The outcomes that you're trying to achieve. Hire a new secretary, prepare an expense report, finish a budget, decide about that Title IX issue, order a computer, plan the birthday party, paint the house, defrost the freezer, install TiVo, make a plan for triathlon training. Can you see how those are all concrete outcomes that you're trying to achieve? Does everybody get that? Big things, little things. Now, features of this list that are really important to make it work. You have to have your whole workload, that is personal and work-related, on the same list. But you can keep them in separate categories. You don't have to have defrost the freezer sitting next to the budget, okay, or the cherry pie that you have to bring to the family reunion next to the R01 application. You can keep them in separate categories. I think that makes it easier to think about. Secondly, this list must not be organized by priority, due date, topic, or importance. It must not. It must be either random, which is what would happen if you just wrote it on a piece of paper, or alphabetical. This is a random list, as if I had written it as I type things up here. Why is that? It's because if you do any kind of that ordering by priority, you will automatically not look at the bottom half of the list. Isn't that true? You'll say, well, those aren't important. No. Everything on this list is something that you have determined needs to be done. It's all important. It's just a matter of what you'll do first and what you'll work on. If you order in any way, you will stop looking at the whole list. And so it's absolutely critical that you not do that. Now, there are other ways that you can set priorities, but not with this list. Okay? The second list is all the things you need to do to get those things done. This is the actual to-do list. Okay? These are the concrete physical actions that you're going to take every day in order to move along the things that are on the first list. And so here's an example of what such a list would look like. Let's look at the items first, and then we'll talk about the format. So call John at that phone number. Draft the introduction to the budget report. Buy a staple remover. Talk to Emma. Print 25 copies. Google climb Mount Everest, if that's on your project list. Purge one file drawer. Read the article on strategic planning. Do you get the idea here? These are action verbs. They are a subset of what I learned yesterday are transitive verbs. I was so excited. I thought I could just say transitive, but it turns out that doesn't really work. It's a broader category. Anyway, there has to be a verb and an action and something that it's acting on to make it on this list. Think about, ponder, perseverate on. These do not belong on this list. Okay? Those are not actions. Something if you're thinking about something, that's great, but there's got to be an action you're going to take. You're going to brainstorm a list. You're going to read something and then make a pro and con. You're going to do something. Whatever it is you're going to do goes on this list. Now, the format for this list is, I think, an important one. What most people want to do is make a daily list. Every day they make a new list. It has 30 things on it. They end up doing 2, and at the end of the day they feel depressed and defeated. Then the next day they start all over again. This list is a never-ending list. It's a never-ending list. That means it's a running list. You start on the top of the page, and then when you get to the next page, you keep writing. The format is lined paper only, 1 item per line. When an item is completed, you cross it all the way out, no little wimpy check marks in the column next to it. And then when a page has 1/2 to 2/3 of the things crossed off, you tear that page off and rewrite all the undone items at the end of the list, thus compacting the list and making it more practical to use, and reminding yourself of why am I not doing that thing that I've now rewritten 3 times. Okay? So this form of action list, you will find, I think, will be much more effective than the daily long list. Now, the final list is one that sounds kind of odd at first, and that's a list of anything you might want to do later. So the purpose of this is to keep track of all those ideas that you have based on things that come to you or things that you think of that you may want to do at some time, but you cannot commit to doing them now. I bet all of you have had the experience who have been involved in writing papers or writing grants of sitting there working on the current graph, and all you can do is come up with ideas about the next one. Have you ever had that happen? Your mind just naturally sort of opens up and goes. And what you have to have is a place to record those things so they don't distract you. They don't distract you from your current focus, so that you don't forget about them. So that's the idea. Here's an example of a list. Clean the garage. Always a good idea. Put that on there. You never have to do it then. You'll be calm. Your brain won't be saying, why aren't we cleaning the garage? It'll just be there to come to whenever. And you can see that some of these are things that you might actually do, and others are things you may never do, but you're intrigued by them. So it's just a mixture. Okay, you look at this list periodically, not very often. Pull things off as needed. Okay, this is really critical to keeping that current work list current. You want to take everything that doesn't belong in your current focus off and put it here. Now, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about email. Does anybody here feel email overwhelmed from time to time? Good, we'll do this section then. For those of you who don't have it yet, just wait. It's coming. Okay, now I understand that Outlook is the email client here, and I understand you probably, all of you may have other sorts of accounts. I'm not going to talk about specifically how to use Outlook, but that will be pictures of what I show as examples will come from Outlook. Okay, so first let's talk about the goal, an empty inbox. Now, Outlook is so certain that you have never seen this before and that you will be nervous that your system has crashed. They put that little sentence up there. There are no items to show in this view. And so it means that when you've achieved this, you'll know it. You'll know it's not a system failure. It would be interesting for me to hear what you think about why this is a good idea, but this probably isn't the format to do that. Well, does anybody have a quick idea about why they think it might be a good idea to get through all of your email and get it out of there? Well, it forces you to organize it and also to look at it all. And what's the real function of email, the good function of email in our lives? I mean, I know that there are problems with email, but what is the sort of underlying real purpose that email survives? Quick response, asynchronous communication about what? About our work, right? And then home stuff too. But I think we have to remember that email is really the media by which we receive most of the work that we do outside of just our routine going to clinic and seeing patients. That's how we find out what we should be doing, as well as then corresponding with people about that work. And if we have an email box that is filled with 4,000 unread messages, when your brain looks at that, it says, what am I missing here? What are we missing? It creates anxiety by virtue of the fact that there's unread stuff. And then if you have a mix of read and unread stuff, oh my goodness, that's even worse. Because then your brain looks and says, well, have we looked at this yet? Oh, I mean, you have to spend it's just horrible. So the best solution is to get through it all and get it out of there, in my opinion. So I'm going to give you a method for doing that. How many people have more than 500 messages read or unread sitting in their inbox right now? Okay, more than 1,000? You may have some system thing that prevents you from getting more than that. More than 5,000? Uh-oh, and you were at this talk a few months ago. This isn't a very good sign. Joel, I want you to pay special attention to this section here. Okay. So the record that I have seen is 18,936, committed by the Navajo rug person, who will remain nameless. Okay. So I'm going to give you a method here for getting started with this project and then for keeping up with daily email. The first thing is if you have more messages in your inbox than you can realistically take care of in one session on a day, setting aside a couple of hours, so more than 2 or 3 days worth, what I want you to do is to create a new folder in your mailbox called Inbox Messages Before whatever 2 days ago's date. And I want you to take all of your inbox and move it into that folder. And then I want you to gaze at the empty screen and feel the calm that overcomes you. And then I want you to go back in here, and I want you to take all of the recent stuff, so today and yesterday, move it back into the inbox, and then do it, and then process it. Okay, till it's empty. Now, okay, let's be real. Do I really think you're going to go out and have empty inboxes by tomorrow? No. I want you to have that as a goal, and if you could get to less than a screenful every day, that would really be excellent. Because once you can consistently do that, you're on the way to being able to go to empty. So less than a screenful is a fine. But setting this backlog, getting it out of your inbox is absolutely critical. Now, what will you do with that backlog? Well, you just let it sit there. You may never actually have to look at it. I had a woman write to me the other day. She said, 14 months ago, I was at your talk. I did this. And today was the first day I've looked in that backlog file in 14 months. And so, but generally what I advise is that people go back as they have time for a minute or two and go back no more than 4 to 6 weeks. And then stop, because there's almost nothing live at that point. It's all dead. And I'm not suggesting that you delete it. I'm just saying don't read it at that point. It's there for you to go to if someone, needs you to do it. So isolate your backlog and get it out of your current life and deal with it when you have time. If you've never had time, no big deal. Now, I want you to you need to set up some folders to get stuff out of your inbox. Now, how you do this is completely up to you. I don't really care. But this is a simple system for those of you who don't have an idea that you can use. The first folder, which for some of you may be the only thing that you like out of this whole presentation, is the waiting for folder. This is a folder that you make exactly the way I have it up there, @waiting for. The reason you use the @ sign is to force it to the top of the list. You could use some other symbol. This is just the one that most people use. The purpose of that folder is to put copies of every email you send to other people for which you need a response. So you're not waiting for yourself here. You're waiting for other people. So I wrote to Corinne and said, exactly what time is this talk I'm giving at the Scripps Green Hospital? And then I would put that message I sent to Corinne in that folder so that I can then go back and look at all the people I'm waiting to hear back from. And I don't have to sort from among 10,000 sent items. I don't have to remember whether this happens to be a thing that I'm waiting for or not. It's just all right there in plain sight. Okay? There are two ways to get the material into it, two simple ways. And you just mentioned both of them. One is to CC yourself on those messages, on the ones that you want to come back. If you feel uncomfortable in having a CC to yourself, which a lot of people do now, you can do a blind copy to yourself as well. So that'll just bounce back in and you drag it over. Or you can go to the sent items folder and just drag it up, which I have to say is the way I started, and I can't change my habit, so that's what I do. There are ways that you can do this with symbols and rules, but you know what? Forget about it. Just start by doing it this way. And if you want to do something techie, you can do that later. So that's a really terrific. Now, the other folders, let me just say first, places, by reference, I mean emails that you need to keep, but they're not part of your active work. They're just something you might have to look back at some later time. I don't care how you organize those. You can just have one big file. You can have it organized like by 6 months of email. It doesn't really matter because the search engines are so good now that you can pretty much find anything, that you really are going to have to look at fairly quickly. So that I don't care about. This folder, though, the projects folder, is a little more important, I think. This is a folder under which you create subfolders for all of those things that are on that first list that we created of all of the current work that we're doing. If there's email associated with a particular thing, like a budget or a grant or a paper or a trip or whatever, you create a subfolder here that has exactly the same name as whatever the name is on the list. And then it will sort automatically alphabetically here. And then every email that you get about that project, you just drag right into that folder so that when it comes time to talk with your colleagues about the paper, everything is in one spot. You don't have to go searching and whatever. Does that concept make sense to people? So that one I think is important. And then when you're done with the project, you finish the paper or the grant or the cherry pie is done, you just move it into reference or delete it, depending on whether you need to keep the stuff or not. Okay. Now, the biggest problem with organization is what to do with emails you cannot respond to immediately, deferred emails. I'm giving you two options here. There are others, but these are two simple ones that you can do in Outlook. One, you can create a folder in the mailbox called Inbox Emails That Require Action. Do you see that? It's the very last one up on that list. And then you can take the email that you are deferring and move it into that folder. Danger! You may never look in that folder. Am I right? So if you're going to do that, you should only do it if you are going to train yourself to look in there every day. You can set reminders on emails by using flag status in Outlook so that they will pop, a reminder will pop up for you. But again, if you bring too many reminders, you'll ignore the reminders. So this solution works for some people but not others. The other solution, which I kind of think is a nice way to start, and that is to create, using the inbox, using the category function, to assign emails that you can't do right now to a category called action required, I have to answer this, you can call it whatever you want. And then you assign that email to that category in Outlook. If you don't know how to do that, it's pretty simple. It's up on the toolbar. Someone can show you. You can email me and I'll walk you through it on the phone or send you instructions, whatever. And then you change the view of your inbox using a toolbar up at the top to view by category. Okay? And then what you'll see is you can expand and collapse these categories. So these are the ones you haven't processed yet. These are the ones where action is needed. And they sit right out there, and you know how many there are. I kind of like that. And then I use that for people I'm waiting for that day. I'm waiting for that day. And if instead of putting in, that's just my own thing. Don't worry about that one. Does this system make sense? This achieves the insight, but it doesn't. You don't look at all the emails. You've collapsed them. Now comes the important part, the path to empty. These are the guidelines you must follow in order to do your email happily in an energy-producing way. Okay? Number one, don't do email first thing in the morning. Take that action list, that to-do list that you've created. Pick one thing from it that's important and do that first. It might be a 30-second task. You could be sending someone an email. That's okay. It could be reading something. It could be looking something up. It could be calling somebody. Do that first, and then go back. And then if you want to go to email right away, that's great. I would never have believed that this helped. But what it does, I don't know what the psychology of it is, but it kind of breaks your addiction. You have the feeling, I have control over my email. My email does not have control over me. I'm serious. It really does change. So whenever you can, do something important first and then go to email. And I think you'll see that things go better. Set a time limit. Don't let yourself get started doing email and then 3 hours later look up at the clock and say, oh my goodness, what happened here? If you have to, in fact, this is a good idea, go out and buy an attractively designed kitchen timer in the shape of a tomato or a chicken or a carrot or a little digital one that's kind of elegant and professional looking. I don't really care. Use that timer. Set the time for whatever you're going to do. And then when the timer goes off, stop doing email. How much time you spend, how many sessions you do during the day, completely depends on how much email you get and how quickly your email has to be addressed. So I can't really tell you exactly what you need to do. But don't let yourself get into unlimited email sessions. Okay, now come the two really important rules. How many people have ever opened an email and closed it without doing anything? Oh, come on, you've all done it. Get your hands up. This is a really, really, really bad habit, which only creates anxiety. Because now your brain knows what's there, and you're not doing anything about it. So whatever the pain is, it just collects. And your head starts to explode and develop bubbles on it around all this anxiety and worry. So the rule is don't open an email unless you have time to process it. That doesn't mean that you have time to actually respond. It means decide what you're going to do with it, which may be to delete it, maybe to send it to reply, it may be to defer it to another time, but don't open without closing, without doing something. And then the final rule. Oh, this is the one. This sounds so painful. So have you ever looked at your email and you looked at the first one and it was from Joel? And you said, no, Joel is going to ask me some horrible thing. I'm going to skip Joel's email. And I'm going to go to Mark's email. Mark will probably be inviting me to lunch and he always pays. I'm going to take Mark's email. And then you skip the next three and on and on and on. Because you're anticipating pain in some and pleasure in others. And the brain, of course, always wants to go to the pleasure. But what happens is all that pain, again, builds up. And you've done this many times. You just never thought about how much anxiety it was causing. So the rule is don't skip. Here's how I do it. In the morning I come in or whenever I sit down to do email. First, I delete every email I can delete without opening it to whittle the list down, sometimes by quite a bit. If I have to open it, it just stays. Then you can organize the remaining emails however you like. You can do them by sender, by conversation, by due date, by the date they came. Organize them, and then what you have to do is you pick at the top or the bottom, and you have to go through each one in turn. You may not skip anything. This sounds painful, but once you get yourself to do it, I think you'll see that you actually feel it really creates energy. And so that's what I would recommend. Now, the final method that I want to mention briefly is, can I say that this is described in some detail in one of those essays that I wrote that's referred to on the website that's on the reference sheet. So if you really are interested in this, you can read a lot more about it in that essay called Time Blocking. This is a method which I wouldn't necessarily think you need to do every single week, but here's the problem that it's designed to handle. Have you ever had the feeling that you look at today's schedule and think, oh, I don't have time to do that important thing, writing or something, but I have plenty of time this weekend? Has anyone ever had that feeling? Or there'll be plenty of time next week or at the end of the week? Part of the idea of this method is to get a better handle on how much actually discretionary time you have. So here's what you do. You take a grid, which I can send you one of. I've created one in Word. It's very elegant. No, it's just a grid that has all the hours that you're not likely to be awake and all the days of the week, all 7. And then you take a pencil, and you do this on paper, and then you go through every day, and you block out 2 things. All the times that you're scheduled to be someplace with somebody else. Go to clinic, go to lab, have a meeting, meet with your advisor, give a lecture, whatever it is that you have to be at. You grade that out. And then all the activities of daily living that you have to do. When you get up in the morning, what I mean by that is, if you get up, say, 2 hours before you come to work, that is not 2 hours that's ordinarily available to you to write, for example. Right? You have to get up and presumably take a shower most days and maybe exercise and get kids ready for work and commute. That time is occupied. So you have to eat lunch, I hope. You should eat lunch. You have to eat dinner. All right? So all of that stuff that you have to do with other people, you have to block off. Now, what you're left with is all the potential discretionary time. And you see how some days look better than others. Tuesday, excellent. Wednesday, not so good. But the mere fact that you know that Tuesday is good and Wednesday is not, when it comes to Wednesday morning at 8 o'clock, you will be much more likely to do an important thing during that 30-minute time slot than if you didn't know that, if you didn't have concrete evidence that that was your only shot that day at getting something done. It automatically focuses you on your priorities. Now, the second step in this process is to schedule your relaxation time. Isn't this a great idea? You schedule all the time that you're going to devote to personal rejuvenation and social time and family time. Some weeks you won't have this much. Some things you might not consider personal. You might have workouts as part of your routine if you're already current. But anyway, so you schedule that, and that's all you do then. You just, in the beginning of the week, your intent is to keep all the green appointments and to use all those holes to get done all the stuff that has to be done off your list. This will automatically focus you. It will create more balance from an energy point of view in your life by having the green stuff in there. So give this method a try. Now I want to close with one final bit of advice. All of the things that we've talked about today are in part about getting more stuff done, but they're also about lowering your stress level. So if you follow this advice, the idea is that you'll be able to get stuff done and be more calm. You'll be more resilient. The truth is, though, you can reduce your stress instantly, right this minute, or as you walk out of the room. You don't have to do any of those things to work on your stress. Here's one of those little Zen monk stories. So I do this myself. You can see why I became a gynecologist and not a graphic artist. So here we have our monk. This is our monk right here. So the story goes, the monk is walking through the forest one day, out doing walking meditation or something, and a tiger, which I hope you can recognize, leaps out of the forest and starts chasing him. So the monk is running, and comes up against a cliff, looks down over the edge of the cliff. There's a big raging river with rocks 100 yards below, caught between the raging river and the tiger, lowers himself down over the cliff, hangs on at the edge, and of course is terrified and, what's going to happen. But then looks up, and underneath the cliff is a strawberry plant with a single